everyone, my name is Claire Lee, and today I'll be interviewing Nirmali Fenn. Could you give us a brief introduction?
Hi, Claire. It's a real honor to be here and be interviewed. Thank you. Um, my name's Nirmali Fenn, and I'm an Australian composer. I was born in Sri Lanka and was adopted and came to Australia when I was 5. And I have been composing since I heard Saint-Saëns' Carnival of the Animals. I remember at school, the teacher put it on and I went, who is the person that creates that? I want to become one of those people. And so that's how I got into composition from a very, very early age. And I basically moved around the world due to my education and also my work, which has now landed me in New York City.
Mm, wow, from a really early age. Okay, so I would say that some of your compositions are inspired by current events, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper. So my first question is, what is the initial inspiration behind your composition pieces? Can you share insights into your creative process, particularly how you begin a new composition?
You know, each piece is different, but all the initial impulses I remember having have all had something in common.
Mhm.
I started by listening to the inside of me. And the most important impulse is the one that I have physically internalized, what my body hears. So I actually spend the every day when I compose meditating on what I can internally hear. So every day I begin by not demanding the placement of a beginning, middle, or end. That's crucial for me. So what I hear that day could be placed anywhere in a piece.
Mm.
So quite often an initial trigger for a piece occurs sometimes in the middle. I would call myself a middle composer because the very initial idea is actually later on put into the middle, doesn't begin that way. So I suppose the whole um, aspect about the initial inspiration is just accepting an idea, and that's the key. And then that idea somehow will birth its structure.
Mhm.
Now, how do I go on from there? I spend a lot of time zooming into the detail of an idea or a moment, and then I zoom out. I want to actually show you an example, if I may, of that one process. I'm actually working on a piece right now for a ensemble in Berlin, and they um, basically it's for French horn, cello, clarinet, and Mongolian singer. And so the piece is called Waking New Memories. I just want to show you
Mhm.
this is the initial idea. This was the idea I first had with the piece. You can see I was looking at release and absorption and releases and absorption. So I'm really thinking about those sounds as what I call a sound field, and I'm blurring that opposition. Now look at the piece. It's totally changed and it's gone into little fragmented cells that just are like little sound ideas, initial ideas that I had that I put on the board because I had this huge wall in front of me. And then I just let it wander as it wants. And I start to form a structure. And that's how the piece is conceived for me.
Mm. I see. So it's like a combination of all like the internal sounds you hear, and then that kind of forms like the whole. It's not like one initial idea.
It's not one initial idea. It's something I physically internalize that seems to grow.
Mm. Okay. Uh, Maybe we should move on to the next question. So, is there a piece you would like to share? The key musical ideas or themes you have explored?
Yeah, I find themes, I found that a very interesting aspect of your question because I don't know how you're perceiving themes, but I find themes function as listening situations. And the most malleable themes are the ones that actually breathe a lot. They can be quite simple, but they have a lot of oxygen in them. So one example I want to show you is from a piece I wrote, and it took me 4 years to compose this piece.
Oh, wow.
But in those entire 4 years, there was one motive that stuck with me the whole time. It never, ever left me. And it really has a lot of room to blossom and grow, as you'll soon hear it. I'll play it. But it has got a lot of oxygen in it. That was the theme that stayed for the whole 4 years and never ever changed. And it was the most fragile theme of the piece. And the question I asked myself as I built everything around it was, what happens when something that vulnerable is not allowed to escape? And so everything is built around that.
Wow, that was really beautiful. I could like hear the melody that kind of like keeps reoccurring. I kind of like felt like it was like a kind of in the air sort of sound. Like it kept going upward, like kind of in the clouds, kind of that feeling.
Yeah, it's about having a lot of oxygen. That's what I meant by in your theme itself, not being frightened, to make it so simple and so clear.
I feel like the idea of like a recurrent theme kind of reminds me of like how other composers like there was like this nagging melody in their like head and they just had to put it down. That's kind of what I was reminded of. Okay, on to the next question. How do you approach creating compositions that resonate across diverse global audiences while staying true to your artistic identity?
I think listening to nature is the key for me. So, listening to your environment plays a big part in communicating our musical language, and yet you still can retain your own musical identity. So, for example, I told you earlier I'm Australian, and in Australia, birds are often in conversation with themselves through their echo. I almost feel this is like an acoustic boomerang effect. It's only in Australia. Let me show you an example. It's fascinating. This is an example of what they call the bellbird, which is in Australia. I'll show you the sound.
Mm-hmm.
He's making a call and it's bouncing off trees, and then he's responding not only to his mate, but also to the environment around him. So I couldn't help but respond to that. And I came up with this piece. And that's how that piece was created, called Blown Echoes. And basically, people can relate or not relate to this concept of me listening to that nature. But if they stretch their imagination a little bit, they'll find connection, even if it isn't about nature itself. So each and every one of us is trying to find a way of connecting with how we internally belong to our surroundings. That's universal, no matter where you are in the globe.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would. There's also a lot of bird sounds near my house too, so I like listening
What
to them.
birds do you hear?
Uh, okay. I think there's blue jays, and then the I think the red cardinals. I like the angry bird like birds, if you know what I
Do
mean.
they sound, they must sound very differently from that, what you just heard, the bellbird.
Yeah, it's not as echoey, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, to the next question. Are there any new directions or unexplored areas within music composition that you are particularly excited to delve into in your future projects?
Now, that's a good question. I like its futuristic vision. So I'm actually currently interested in how different types of rupture can bring about different states of change. How do different levels of change react or respond to rupture? I feel that we're really living in a time that's surrounded by different types of ruptures. Some are seismic, some are tiny. They're just all around us for some reason. So I'm kind of responding to what's going on in our social environment right now. I'm also exploring something with another piece. I don't know if it'll work, you know. I'm hoping it might. It's I'm labeling it sort of as an example of polyphonies of time. If you could hear the same idea, very same idea, I compose one idea and I imagine how it would sound in different temporal and physical dimensions. So reimagine that one idea, um, and or the flow of one sound idea first in air and what it would sound like in water, because sound travels faster in water. How does it alter the state of that sound object? So I'm constantly thinking about how to consider the process and calibrate change itself. And I think that if you notice breaks in continuity more, it really enriches how we piece together the story of our composition. So this is something I'm kind of dealing with right now in my music.
Mm. On to the next question. So, in your opinion, what are the biggest challenges faced by contemporary composers and performers within the classical music industry today?
Well, one major challenge, I think, is the collapse in listening time. We are in an ecosystem populated by sound. Do we ever get a moment to consider how precious the sound really is? Something I ask myself all the time and my students. I worry about our focus also being too condensed, and losing our sense of larger continuities. I don't know whether you've had that experience when you've worked with a composer, but I find I'm asking performers a lot to not focus on a detail, but sense how things cohere at a larger level. Look for the bigger musical picture. So I often tell performers, find yourself a musical anchor in the piece that you're playing, and let that piece then breathe according to the anchor you've found. So it's only yours. You've found it yourself. And I suppose in general, the whole idea of the collapse of listening time and also the way we're really focusing more on detail rather than the bigger picture gets me back to a concern. I think one of the biggest challenges is to attentional ecology.
Yeah,
Mm.
I completely agree with you. I think especially now in our generation where like technology and like the digital like era, like all of that is so prevalent, and just like the very like bite-sized videos are also like viral, and that's what people are getting used to. And now their focus is like the time they can focus or be like their attention span is decreasing. And I think
Mm.
I yeah, I kind of just realized like how that also relates to music and about like kind of um like if you're too um like encased in like the details of it, you can't really see the bigger picture. And I'm kind of just seeing now how it relates to like music and like how it affects like listening.
Yeah, I think in some respects, our almost impatience with continuity prevents us from actually searching for that larger picture.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
patience is super important in music, especially. Okay, on to the next question. Are there any emerging trends or movements that you believe will impact the contemporary genre positively?
Mhm. I love this question, and I can't wait to give you my answer. My answer is collaboration. I think there is real movement now towards caring about music making. So performers are really caring about how something is made. How something is made matters as much as what is made. For instance, I wrote a piece called Prayer, which is for bassoon and piano. And I basically almost co-wrote that with the performer. It was so collaborative. Every single phrase, idea, sound bend, etc., was digested by the performer before we even went into the rehearsal process. It meant that the piece belonged to that performer. So I'm finding collaboration is something I find that's happening more and more. And I think that's a very precious thing because process now doesn't become a very singular thing, which was often a composer just sitting at a desk composing by themselves. It really becomes a creative conversation. I'm seeing this more and more, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think especially now, like everyone is super like connected, and I also think it's interesting how you say like the connection between like the composer and like the performer. Like I think it's kind of like a communication between like both people are engaging with each other.
And I think, Claire, that has something to do with the whole performers and composers actually caring about making music rather than seeing this score as a product. And then I have to, as a performer, um, actually interpret that object. By having that conversation with the composer, you're knowing so much more.
Mhm. Yeah, there was this one composer event at my music school, and basically it was these composition students, and their pieces were being played by the orchestra, and they were kind of making edits along the way. They were like kind of shifting, like as they hear it and see how people engage with it. So,
And why not, Claire? I think that's so beautiful that a composer can just go, actually, I think this is so much more enriching if I was to do it this way. There's actually a beautiful example by Stockhausen. You know the composer Stockhausen?
no, I don't.
Oh, well, he's an amazing composer, but he tends to be very, very serious about every single detail and note that he puts on the page. And yet he was in a rehearsal with the ensemble, and the performer made a mistake. And he said, "Wait, I love what you're doing. I'm going to rewrite that moment."
Mm. Yeah, that's really nice. Like getting inspiration from the people who are
hmm
playing.
And I think now because we've become so much more collaborative, there's room for those conversations to happen.
Mm. Yeah, I think like in the past, like there's composers whose works are never played in person. It's just kind of in their head, but it would have been nice if they could engage with their performer too. Okay, on to the next question. How can contemporary classical music be made more accessible to a wider audience? Are there specific strategies or initiatives you believe would be effective in generalizing its appeal?
So accessibility doesn't mean simplification, it means orientation. The biggest barrier isn't complexity, It's the fear of not understanding. That seems to actually, that fear of not understanding, that seems to be blocking the listening imagination. I think we could invite pre-concert listening exercises, invite audiences into the kernel of a piece, and then their imaginations can expand from that. We just need to build the fact that audiences can trust their perception. We need to build that into audiences again, because for a long time, there was a distance between the performer and composition and that of the audience, almost like a gaping distance, especially created in the 1960s, wherein if you didn't understand a piece, then you weren't going to connect with the piece. And I think that that's actually a blocker of musical imagination and listening imagination. So it's really about overcoming this fear of not understanding rather than actually changing the music itself.
Yeah. I feel like I can kind of relate to that with like there's like when I listen to contemporary music, sometimes I get this feeling like I just don't get it, and that kind of is like a little bit frustrating. And it would be nice to be kind of oriented, not in like the right direction, but just to have like an open mind and like kind of take ownership of your perception.
Oh, you put it so beautifully. Taking ownership of your perception. Perfect.
Okay, on to the next question. What is your vision for the future of music composition with AI technology or any kind of technology? What are the pros and cons?
Okay, so we've seen it throughout the ages that technology can expand oral imagination, but there is also a risk of outsourcing responsibility. Now, the danger isn't that AI will compose music. I'm sure AI is composing music. I think the danger is that humans stop listening deeply because machines can simulate coherence. So, used carefully, technology can and will and has sharpened perception, but it can accelerate the disposability of our senses. It can erode our senses. And they're the pros and cons we've got to play with and balance with.
Mm. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, people are will be like kind of saying like, oh, like technology can also like create this music, and they would feel like maybe like the value of music could like diminish. But that's kind of I see what you're saying. I there was this one like Google Doodle thing they made. It was for Bach's birthday, I think, and they had this like AI that was composing like Bach. I mean, it certainly wasn't very like Bach, but I thought that was like one example of how like technology is incorporated into music.
But I mean, it can go even further than this. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes, Claire. I don't think it's a bad thing, and I don't think we need to um, like refuse its growth. I just as long as we are stimulated sensorially, as long as we get the phenomenon of how it reacts to our body, our way we breathe and react and respond to each other, then it can go forward. Now, if it disables that, then we've got a problem.
Mm. Okay. Are there any outreach programs or educational initiatives that you find particularly promising in promoting contemporary classical music to diverse audiences?
Yeah, so programs that center listening before explanation, I found to be very effective. This is something you can see actually in artist residencies. I did one at an artist residency in Minnesota called the Anderson Center. I want to just show you what what I was doing here. Now, I am talking to a group of people that are non-musicians. The person next to me is actually a visual artist. And I'm talking to this group of people and telling them something about how we as composers, at least, hear.
Now, because of sound, you know there is an inside. You know that this has depth. Sound reveals depth. Through the ears, we can inhabit a space in its fullness simply by listening. We can actually feel that the world is truly 360 degrees because of our ears. That's such a precious and amazing quality about our ears.
So it's the whole idea of actually telling these people to enjoy having a pair of ears. Now, imagine more initiatives that could allow us to have a listening walk before a concert. Imagine if we could listen to what it feels like to sit under a piano or lie under a piano before a piano concert. Imagine if we were invited to feel the vibration of percussion instruments before an orchestral concert. Wouldn't that be amazing in helping us really absorb the sound? So I think education is about restoring curiosity and building our personal connection to the magic of the vibration of the sound that will be played before us. So let's make a move to creating a musical experience. Let's create these initiatives that invite listeners into a concert as though they were being invited into a vibrational space that they could enter. That's what needs to happen, and I think that's happening throughout.
This kind of reminds me, well, the idea that like sound is so precious to us, and like I know I saw this one, like I think it was a documentary, but there was this person who didn't have sight, and it's a common thing that if you don't have one of your senses, there's other senses that are heightened. And this person, who had lost sight at a very early age, his like listening ability was greatly heightened. So he was able to have this kind of spatial awareness, even though he didn't have sight. He could kind of like he had like this like clicker, I think, and he could like with the echoes kind of sense how far something away is, and I thought that was amazing and kind of shows how valuable being able to listen is.
You're absolutely right. When you are able to sort of take away one of the senses, especially our eyes, they're very good at thinking that they've got the exactitude of something. But our ears tell us what is above us, below us, around us. Our eyes can't do that. And the ears can do that at the same time. So I actually find that some of my students in one of my classes called Living in Sound, I blindfold them in order to be able to get them to hear that aspect, because you need to do away with the visuals.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, a lot of music students do not know how to start or how to understand modern classical music. Do you have any tips for them?
Mm-hmm. So start by noticing what you feel physically, not what you understand. Confusion is not a failure, it's just an entry point into it. And ask yourself, what are the sound asking when you're feeling this physically? And then repeatedly listen. I know that contemporary music often is confusing, but it reveals itself through familiarity. For instance, I remember being told by my friend to listen to the composer Luigi Nono. Nono had written a string quartet called Fragmente Stille, and I hated it at the beginning. I hated it and I hated the score. I almost threw it away from me. Like physically, I was repulsed by it. But I listened to it another 9 times. And by the 10th time, I think it's one of the most extraordinary pieces ever written. I love this piece, but I just couldn't grasp it on the first listen. And the thing was is that physically it really revolted me. It was very, very viscerally disturbing. And yet I put myself through each listen to hear it from a different angle, to be open each time and go, okay, I'm learning something new. Oh my God, I hear something I never heard before about this piece. Wow. And it was extraordinary.
I think that wraps up our interview. Thank you so much for joining me for this interview. And I had a great time, and I learned a lot about contemporary music and your music and the inspirations behind it.
Thank you, Claire, and thanks for letting me be part of this.